15 years, quite a bit. We're now joined by Neill Woelk. He covers Colorado, CUBuffs.com. I saw him at Big 12 Media Days in Vegas. And, of course, Colorado was there on Wednesday with Dion and many others. Thanks for your time. We do appreciate it, Neill. What did you take out of all that you heard, what was said to you, what you asked, what were some of the answers, or just that day for Colorado in Vegas?
Specifically for Colorado, I think they're going to be a team that's going to compete in the Big 12. I'm not going to say they're going to win a championship. I'm not going to say that they're going to run the table or anything like that, but I think they have made enough improvements where they needed to. I think they've got one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. I think they have some very good skill players, including Travis Hunter, last year's Horning Award winner. And I think there's enough there to make them competitive in a conference that, I'd love for you to tell me who's going to win it, because I honestly don't know.
Pick a team, Neill.
Yeah.
They got a chance to win this bad boy. It sure seems like.
It does. It's just such a balanced conference. It's different. Colorado's been in the Pac-12 the last, 13 years. And before that, in the Big 12, and they always played in a conference where there were some elite teams, whether it was Nebraska, Texas, Oklahoma when they were in the Big 8 and the Big 12. Then they move on to the Pac-12, and they've got USC, and Washington was really, really good, went to the playoffs a couple of years. Oregon was really good. USC. Right now, I don't see an elite team in the Big 12 like that, but I see 6, 7, 8 teams that could be really good and do some damage when they do get to the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the way we all agree. We went over our rankings, our preseason rankings, and we talked about it for hours. We could talk about it for more hours. Paul?
Neill, do you see this offensive and defensive line being better enough to the point where Shedeur Sanders might have time to do things and not just make up things on the fly?
You mean run for his life on every play?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Shedeur Sanders got sacked 52 times last year. About most of any quarterback in the nation. He got chased out of the pocket, 4 or 5, 6 more times a game. Got hit, 8 or 10 more times a game. I think they've made some solid improvements up front. Is it a great offensive line? No. But this is not an offensive line that's going to try and bulldoze people. They're not going to try and line up and just run it down people's throat and run them over. They have to give him enough time to throw the ball. He's great creating out of the pocket. He's great freelancing back there. I think it's a good enough line that he'll have time to be consistent and be successful on a week-in, week-out basis. The question to me still is, there's a couple questions. Colorado's defensive line, I think they made some big improvements. They got a transfer from Arizona State named B.J. Green, who's preseason all-conference. They added some other big bodies up front. But I still think Colorado's probably going to have to outscore people. I think they've got a much better chance at doing that this year than they did a year ago.
Neill, you brought up the 13 years in the Pac-12, and there was the Big 12. I mean, basically dancing on their grave in Las Vegas, a home site for the Pac-12 at Allegiant Stadium, And it's kind of dawned on me at one point when they were strolling through, but there is that history of the Big 12. Just what did it kind of feel like to see them in the new yet old league and, coming across familiar teams from recent history, but also some of those that they used to dance with back in the day? Yeah,
I grew up in Colorado. I grew up as a Big 8 guy. I mean, I grew up watching the Big 8. I grew up, then they went to the Big 12. And so I've always had, an affinity for that conference, going clear back. And when they merged with the Southwest Conference or took 4 teams, whatever you want to call it, I enjoyed that league tremendously. I always thought it was a lot of fun. I just thought it was a great conference. It's going to be interesting without Oklahoma and Texas. I freely admit that, when the last time Colorado was in the Big 12, they also had Nebraska there, never mind Missouri and Texas A&M. So it's obviously going to be a different conference, but I still think there's a feeling for, some of the old farts like me that Colorado's coming home to a degree. They're going back to kind of where they belong in that Big 12 rather than the Pac-12. Pac-12 was great. I have no complaints. It was a lot of fun. Great travel conference. I mean, you got to go to Tempe in the wintertime. You got to go to Tucson, Southern California, the Bay Area. But as far as just a competitive league that I think they belong in, the Big 12, it's kind of like coming home for them.
Neil, we have had even some coaches that we've had on the show of the teams that have joined the Big 12 have mentioned the passion of the fan bases throughout the Big 12. Now, there's some places that don't have 60,000 or more. There's those stadiums, Baylor, TCU. There's some stadiums that just don't have the larger stadiums. A lot of it's the size of their school as well. But they mentioned that. Did you see that? I know that USC has history. Oregon, Washington. There's some place. Washington State on the road is hard. But is that something you've kind of heard too, that moving into a conference where across the board, no matter the size of the school or the stadium or attendance, that is all football?
I think that's what that gets a lot of people excited about going back to the Big 12. I mean, and again, the Pac-12 was good for Colorado in a lot of reasons. I think it's great that they're going back to the Big 12. But there were a lot of times you would go to, and I'm going to start picking on schools, and if somebody hears this, I'm going to get, you go to an Arizona in 2015, 16, when they were okay but not great. There'd be 25, 30,000 people in the stands. The students would kind of be there, but maybe not if there was a big party going on somewhere else. There were other places like that. Oregon State had its ups and downs. Washington, when they went south under Jimmy Lake, their fan base kind of pooped away really quickly. Cal was never an exciting place to play. Stanford, man, I've been at Stanford when there might have been 15 or 20,000 people in the stands, and you couldn't tell. I mean, there were just not that many people there. So I don't know of a place in the Big 12 that Colorado was going to go that is not going to be an exciting, packed place to see Colorado play. And they're not going to come just to see Dion. They're not going to come to see the Buffaloes. But, you talk about Baylor and TCU having smaller stadiums. Man, I tell you what, Colorado went to TCU last year. That stadium was just rocking. And so I think there's a lot of excitement about that just about everywhere you go in the Big 12. And a place like Kansas, I'm sorry to ramble on here.
No.
That was a place that was dead 10 years ago. Now, you could go to Kansas and see more people at Midnight Madness than you saw in the stadium. But that's not the case anymore. You go to KU this year, you're going to see a jam-packed stadium and people getting excited about football. So, yeah, I think there's across the board, top to bottom, there's probably more passion for football in the Big 12 and basketball as well.
What have you gotten from players that may have left the program about why it didn't work out with them and Coach Prime?
What I hear from them is just that they wanted a different place to play. Coach Prime came to Colorado a year and a half ago, and they rebuilt the roster from top to bottom. Probably, players that weren't going to be higher level Division I players, but they thought could maybe fill the gap. And I think you're going to just start seeing that more and more everywhere. They're taking kids, they're bringing them in, and if they don't work out, the door's open and they're headed out next. They're headed out the next year and looking for greener pastures, maybe looking for a little NIL. They lost a really good running back who went to Kansas State. Dylan Edwards scored 3 touchdowns against TCU last year, 3 or 4. And had a great game against TCU. Was one of the big, difference makers in that game. Didn't quite, see what he wanted to see this year. They brought in a couple other running backs. He was a little bit homesick, so he went back home to Kansas, and now he's at Kansas State. So I think there are a variety of reasons for why guys leave, and I think that it's probably the same story just about every school you go to. But Colorado's been under the microscope because Dion did it so differently when he got here. And now it's, I think it's becoming more and more common, and I think it will be less as the program stabilizes and they get more kids in that are going to stay and be here and the kids that they want. So I think that'll start to go down a little bit.
Neil, when it comes to Colorado, and by the way, on that, Dylan Edwards, and I was trying to search out where he did that, the outlet that he did the interview where he talked about why he decided to leave.
With somebody, yeah.
And then Dion, and I'll find out who that was from so we can properly credit them. Yeah. But Dion had a great response. So, yeah, it's not all like bad blood, right? Like the Dylan Edwards situation was great. And so I think that was very, very cool to see that video and see that explained that way. But when it comes to Colorado, there is so much noise about the head coach, about the quarterback, about the dual, star offensive, defensive talent in Travis Hunter and so on. What are people missing in all of that noise about Colorado heading into 2024 that you think is of particular interest?
To me, what I'm very curious to see, and this is I don't know what's going to happen. In all honesty, he redid the coaching staff. They brought in a lot of new players. They brought in, they've got some great players. They've got a couple first-round draft picks in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. They brought in a lot, more new players. I think their talent is greatly improved. To me, one of the, and I don't want to say even question mark, but something I'm really curious to see what happens is this coaching staff. He remade the coaching staff again. It's a new offensive coordinator. Pat Shurmur, who has been in the NFL forever and is now, works very closely with Shedeur Sanders, and he's the offensive coordinator. They brought in a defensive coordinator who has never been a coordinator. He was a very good, successful defensive back coach with the Cincinnati Bengals, Robert Livingston, but he's never been a coordinator. How's he going to call a game in college football where every week is totally different? Mm-hmm. When you're in the NFL, you know what you're going to see next week. You've got a pretty good idea. I mean, people do different things, and if you're seeing a Mahomes or you're seeing a Dak Prescott, something like that, you're seeing different guys and different schemes, but it's still fairly similar week in, week out in the NFL. College football is not that way. So I'm really anxious to see how Robert Livingston adapts as a defensive coordinator in that regard. They've got a new offensive line coach. Never been an offensive line coach before. He's been a grad assistant, been an analyst, never been an on-the-field coach, a guy named Phil Lodeholt. Had a good NFL career, but how's he going to react? They got a new defensive line coach. They got new linebackers coaches. So there's a lot there that I'm just curious to see how that all adjusts and how that all happens on game day, because we know that game day adjustments are huge in college football.
Neil, last question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
The last question.
No.
They had an unbelievable start with the win against TCU. Then they beat Nebraska. They had that phenomenal game that ended like at 2:00 in the morning here against Colorado State. That was just unbelievable. It was incredible theater.
Yes.
If they start, they have North Dakota State, which is no gimme, and Dion mentioned that. Nebraska, you would think, is better. But if they start and go 3-0, 4-0, but it's not against someone who just played for the national title, will it get crazy again? The expectations? Okay.
No. If they start 3-0 or 4-0, I think Baylor's their Big 12 opener.
Right.
If they start 4-0, they'll be ranked in the top 25 because Dion will be out there every week. Coach Prime will be telling people, "Hey, look at us. Look, believe in us. I told you to believe in us. I told you we were going to be good." And so I think, to me, the most important game on that schedule right now is Nebraska. I think they beat North Dakota State. I don't think it's easy. They know that coaching staff is well aware of what North Dakota State's going to be bringing to Boulder. The following week they go to Lincoln. They have beaten Nebraska, I think, 3 times in a row now.
You don't have to bring that up. I'm a lifelong Huskers fan, but go ahead.
Well, okay. Well, yeah. Sorry about that, but
no, I'm joking.
And I tell you what, I guarantee you, Trev Alberts, left there not happy with what's going on. And I guarantee you the new AD and I guarantee you Matt Rule are aiming toward that game.
Yeah.
That is, for both programs, I think that is a swing game that could decide the trajectory of an entire season for 2 programs.
I agree. It was the game against Nebraska when Scott Frost made his much-anticipated debut in Lincoln where they could not convert on the first down late in the game with the ball around Colorado 45, and they were stopped short. Martinez, I think, fumbled, and, a long pass down the sideline to the kid who came out of Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, Laviska Shenault. Stephen Montez heaved it. Not quite a Hail Mary, but it was he was looking to the Lord for a little help,
Yeah.
and landed right in Lavisca's lap, and they won that game. And then the year later, Nebraska came to Boulder, and they threw a flea flicker, 96-yard flea flicker, for crying out loud. They're down by 10 at the half.
Yep, absolutely.
So there's a lot of memories there from Nebraska, and I do think that game goes a long way in deciding how both teams go this season.
Thanks for your time. Really good stuff, Neill. Thank you very much.
Anytime. I appreciate the call.
Neill,
you guys take care.
Woelk of CUBuffs.com with a perspective on Colorado coming off the media days in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it was fun to see the prime of